Well, we're discussing animation, anthologies. So I might as well have thrown this in there. You might have thought, man, look, he's doing the Animatrix. No, actually, I'm going back. In fact, we were doing a story this week about that. There's going to be a reboot, remaster, whatever they're going to be doing with this movie. Basically, Heavy Metal, 1981. I just got this on Blu-ray. It is at a fantastic price, less than $8. You can get it online right now. If you're not familiar with heavy metal, this is one of the greatest anthology animated movies. It was well done, even though at the end it was rushed. Because if you ever see the documentary, it was rushed into the theaters, but still did a fantastic job based on the comic magazine of the same name. Most of the stories are based on stories that were in those magazines. We have a slew of directors doing this. Also, someone majorly involved with it, his name. Ivan Reitman was involved in this as one of the producers of this production. It is a fantastic production with the voices of John Candy, Eugene Levy, John Vernon, Joe Flaherty. John Candy did some great segments on there, especially Den, voice of young Den on there. I mean, all the stories are so fantastic. So Beautiful, So Dangerous, Soft Landing, Captain Stern, B-17, Harry Canyon, Grimaldi. I mean, and there's some stuff that they couldn't even put in here. So Beautiful, So Dangerous is a larger story scheme. And they could have gone any other direction on there, but they went with the sexy part of it. But that was heavy metal. Heavy metal was sexy, nudity, violence, and one hell of a kick-ass soundtrack. Have you heard this soundtrack? It is a great soundtrack by some great musicians. You have the likes of Riggs, Blue Oyster Cult, Donald Fagen, Jerry Riggs, Stevie Nicks, Journey, Cheap Trick, Don Fiedler, Grand Funk Railroad, Cheap Trick, Nazareth. I mean, Trust, Sammy Hagar. I mean, there's so much. Black Sabbath, Devo. I mean, there's so much in this soundtrack. I recommend also getting the soundtrack on CD if you're able to grab this, because the sound is fantastic. And let me tell you something. It took a while for this movie to get put on video, because there was at the time period, most people didn't realize is that the music rights weren't secure. I mean, this stayed idle for quite some time until the rights were secured. Then it was remastered. I believe it was in the 90s on there. It was about 96. It was remastered, put back in the theaters. At the time, I think it was the 5.1 was just coming in on that. And the sound was excellent. People went to go see this afterwards. I mean, it grossed money. It did well. It did post for a sequel. The sequel was okay, not so great. Not to the look, the feel, the sound of a great anthology. In fact, the sequel wasn't an anthology. It was just one story. There are plans to reboot this, to redo this. I mean, I don't have any faith on the people working on the new version of this for several reasons. One, you're not going to get this look ever again, because there was a lot of rotoscoping done on this, and there was some live action stuff in there because it was rushed at the end. If you've seen this movie, the ending explosion where the house explodes, it looks like it's real, and it was a model. They weren't able to rotoscope the model. They didn't have enough time because Reitman wanted to get the movie into theaters by August 9th, but they still had months of work to do. But they were able to accomplish this in that period of time and get the movie out, and it looks fantastic. Still to this day, it looks great. I mean, some people criticize it because of the sex appeal of it, the sex in it, the violence and stuff like that. But that's the adventure of it. I mean, if you've never picked up a heavy metal comic, pick it up. pick the older stuff up, not the newer stuff, the older stuff. Some of the newer stuff is the older stuff. Anything with Den in it or Stern or, So Beautiful, So Dangerous, get that one as well. I mean, there's some great stories that was promoted in this magazine, and it was always a great cover. Every issue had a great cover to it. There was so much fun these guys had with this. And most people say, well, these guys must have been smoking pots. Actually, believe it or not, they weren't. They weren't at all. But, people who've gone to see this movie, let's see, Puff Puff Pass, as you would say in the theaters. And this was playing at midnight screenings, similar to like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And like I say, it took a while for it to get on video. It got on VHS, and people mocked that basically this movie would sell 1 million copies. And what happened? It sold 1 million copies. To this day, this is touted one of the best animated films of all time because everything worked. There were some errors in it, but the errors worked for its favor. The music soundtrack worked well, both the metal and also the standard soundtrack, the orchestra soundtrack to this. It worked. I mean, if you watch just Den alone, Den is just beautiful. The music is just beautifully done. And the same thing with So Beautiful, So Dangerous. I mean, it is just fantastic. And this is when you look back to Love, Robots, and Death. The soundtrack is okay, but still, you got a great anthology. And the same thing with Robot Carnival. Robot Carnival, even though Robot Carnival came out about 6-7 years later, Robot Carnival was also very good in soundtrack and also in visuals. That's what makes a good anthology, that you have a good story, good visuals, and a kick-ass soundtrack. Some of the Blu-ray features on there is that they have a rough cut version of the movie in there. That's in other words, before the coloring and stuff like that, and the soundtrack all leaked in there. There are some scenes that were not put into the movie that were left out that could have changed the look of the movie itself, which would have still made it a very good movie. And then there's a complete documentary, small little mini documentary with the crew of the movie as they explain the details, the trials, tribulation, everything that they went through to promote and to create this masterpiece. And I call it a masterpiece. And it's a true masterpiece. It's very hard to get something like this again. People said, nah, this time period and stuff like that. Even the guys that did this movie, they said we can't do it in a political environment like this today. Bullshit. If you have the will, the way, the knowledge, you can do this. You can do anything. You have to remember, those who have criticized movies like this are the little minority people. For years, movies like this have been criticized. Even back then, this movie has been criticized for what it is. Back then, it was because, it's a cartoon. Why is it a cartoon? It should be for kids and this and that. Why is there sex going on? Oh, my God. But it wasn't made for kids. It's R-rated. So is the magazine. There's a joke in there from one of the creators. They said when he first got in the 70s, the heavy metal magazine, the comic book store was reluctant to sell it to him because basically the robot had breasts, but it was robot breasts. And he was like, oh, okay. But, from a lot of the footage and stuff like that you've seen is that there is pure sex and there's nudity, but it's drawn in a beautiful way. Look, and I'll say this again, look at Den. All you got to do is look at the drawings of Den and how it's created. Yeah, there's a lot of nudity in there, but it's not drawn like a porno. It is drawn artistically, very well done when it comes to this. And this whole entire movie from back to forward. If you haven't seen it, just to give you a bit of it, it's concerning about a great darkness of evil coming to a little girl's home to kill her, but he decides to, as they say, throw out his plans and everything to her show him how evil he is, how strong he is through stories from various places where his evil has touched. And that's what we get to see in this. A fantastic main story with anthology little stories in between. I mean, not knocking on Animatrix. I loved Animatrix. Animatrix was also very well done too as well. I mean, there's a slew out there. This is great. It's fantastic. I praise it every time. Get it on Blu-ray. It's beautiful on Blu-ray. The soundtrack is fantastic on Blu-ray. But also do buy the soundtrack. This is one thing that should be accompanied. This should be sold with the soundtrack, if anything. They should sell this as a pack.